Welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm Denise Medved, your host, and I'm also the creator and founder of the Ageless Grace Brain Health Program worldwide, which is in 50 US states and 30 other countries. The purpose of this show is to remind you that it's never too late to begin making choices to create the life that you want to live. Our episode today is called Honoring the Past and Nurturing the Present, documenting and maintaining family connections in order to create value and meaning in our lives. And my guest today is Karen Haseley, who is not only a whole list of things that I'm going to tell you about in just a few minutes, but she's also one of the Ageless Grace trainers. And so, she has been a wonderful friend for many, many years. And welcome, Karen. We're so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Denise. I am so excited to be here and share all this information with you guys today. Just sends chills down my spine.
Well, I think we have a real treat in store for everyone who's watching or listening. Let me just tell you a little sentence that Karen gave me that'll set the scene for what we're going to talk about today. Did you ever find an old letter that was written to you from your grandmother or your father, your mother, maybe a sibling or a good friend? And when you reread it, how did it make you feel? This session is all about family letters, connections to loved ones, and history from a small hamlet in upstate New York, where Karen is in her family historic home. And I am here in Hendersonville, North Carolina, in another historic home. Although it didn't belong to my family, I feel the history of it, and it makes me happy to be part of its legacy as a home. It'll be 100 years old in just a few years. So Karen is a retired certified therapeutic recreation specialist. That's a CTRS. And she worked for 30 years for the city of Greenbelt, Maryland, running the senior citizen program and making special accommodations for those with disabilities so that they could participate in the recreation department programs. And I know for a fact that Karen also came up with a very clever idea while she was working with the Parks Department, and that's in the summer when they run the camps for the children. She would invite the children into her senior Ageless Grace classes and sit them around in a big circle. There are videos on YouTube if you look for it. And the children and the seniors would interact with each other, playing the tools and the games of Ageless Grace, laughing, having a good time. And it was a brilliant idea. I just love that you did that, Karen.
Oh, it's always so much fun. It was amazing how the seniors reacted to these little, most of them were like 4 and 5 year olds that were coming up and participating, and how the children just loved the tools. I mean, they were, it was hard to keep them in their seats, but it was really a lot of fun. So,
Well, it was a brilliant idea because mixing generations like that is powerful for both ages, as you said. Their grandparents or
right.
older adults that aren't grandparents, or their grandkids have long grown up. And so it's a joy to be with children. And then there are children that may not have adults in their life or may not have grandparents in their lives. And so, what a beautiful connection. She retired in 2017 in order to provide assistance and care for her mom when she was diagnosed with a neurological disorder. And you're going to hear more about Karen's mom as we talk and have our conversation today. Karen believes that retirement was one of the best decisions of her life because she not only got to spend quality time with her mom, but she also got to reap all the rewards of all that her mother had to share with her. She's been an educator since 2013. She was one of the first educators that we had in Ageless Grace, and a trainer since 2015, where she trains other people to be Ageless Grace educators. And I have very often told this story. I just told it the other day to one of my classes about one of our educators who would do a Skype practice with her mom for 10 minutes a day, which is how long we suggest you continue to practice the program daily in order to get the most benefits for your brain. And she would often include her sister on that Skype. And what a wonderful thing for Karen could practice her ageless grace. Her mom got the benefit of not only being with her daughter and interacting, but laughing and having fun over the neurological tools that are part of ageless grace. And the sister got to be there as well, so that there was a family gathering on Skype. So if you can't get together in person, be creative and get on Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp or some other form of platform that allows you to interact with your loved ones, even if it's at a distance. So I'm going to let Karen explain those sessions as part of what she has to talk to us about later. And she's going to share a lot about her mom, her family, her grandmother, the house where they live, and Rentzlerville, New York, where she is and where the house is. So the very first thing that I want to say is that I'd love to hear more about you teaching. Your mom and your aunt, I believe, was part of it, and your sisters. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that experience and about your mom.
Okay. Thanks, Denise. And, you know, you described what I did over Skype with my mom and aunt very well. I will put in a little caveat in that at the time I learned about Ageless Grace, was supposed to be presenting at a big conference. And I wasn't certified. Literally, when trying to figure out as a recreation therapist, what am I going to do with 50 people in the audience, recreation-wise, trying to come up with something creative. An Ageless Grace educator walked into my office and started saying she was interested in teaching Ageless Grace. I knew nothing about Ageless Grace. I went to the website. I thought, oh my gosh, this would be great for the conference. I ordered the things. I got the DVDs. I was actually sharing the DVDs with my mom and my aunt over Skype because my aunt had COPD. And her ability to move or get, and she was on the wait list for lung transplants. And my mom was getting on in age. Anyway, I will make a long story short. Denise allowed me to, after, because I must have watched the DVD, I don't know, 15 zillion times, over Skype with my mom, and my mom and aunt helped me pull together which of the tools I should do during this presentation, as well as the other educator. So that's at a point I was so surprised after presenting it, how much energy was just flowing from the room of over 100 people on this presentation. And I had never done it in front of a group before. Mm-hmm. I tell you, I'm surprised I could walk out of the room because my head was just so full. And after I got certified, I wanted to continue to do this with my mom and my aunt, one, for their health benefit, but also to help me because now I could go past what was on the DVD. I'm now certified. I can, go forward with that. So it was great because my mom would be at her house, my aunt would be at her house, I would be in Maryland. They were both in North Carolina. I was in Maryland. We would do our 10 minutes and then we would sit and talk and chat. And then my sisters, I have two twin sisters, one would decide to come on and the other one would decide to come on. So all of a sudden we had, 5 different people doing Ageless Grace, and we would all laugh and play and sing. And then we'd spend 30 or 40 minutes just catching up on our lives. And it was great. It was such a good connection. And anyway.
Add in also that this was before the pandemic. So they were way ahead of their time with getting together on Skype so that they could, play Ageless Grace, help their health, help Karen become more comfortable with the tools of ageless grace and have some family interaction and fun at the same time. So you were way ahead of your time. A lot of people say like, "Oh, I get together with my family every Sunday since COVID," but you were before COVID.
Oh,
So
this,
tell us a little bit about your mom. She was a
okay.
special person.
She was a very, very special person. Denise mentioned that I had retired in 2017 to help her. She had been diagnosed with it's called cortical basal syndrome, and it's in the Parkinson's family. But her brain was still as sharp and memory was still as good, up until the day she passed. But it affected her ability to communicate, to talk, and to move. And we had, I'm not going to go through the whole history. We went through a lot of stuff before she was actually diagnosed. And I had always felt I was only able to take a week off of work here and there, and just spending a week at a time, leaving a lot of the other care to my siblings, to my sisters. And I thought, after looking, and realizing I can actually retire, I think I can afford to do this. And then I would spend 6 to 7 months with my mom in this house, because this house here in Rensselaerville was her absolute favorite place on earth. I tell people that I've been coming up here since before I was born. And that is true, because, my mom, let me get back to my mom. I can easily jump forward. My mom was a very intelligent, she loved to talk, and she loved to tell stories. She loved history of Rensselaerville, history of this house, our family history. And you will hear a lot about my family history in a bit. But she also loved to share those stories. My hometown was in another small town in North Carolina. She loved the history of that place. She was on our town was Grifton. It was a small town that wasn't on the map. And the town board decided we needed something to put us on the map. And they decided to have a shad festival, as in fish, because there's a stream that cuts the town in half. And every April, the shad swim up it to spawn. My mother, for 40 years, was the publicity chair. She wrote all the articles, took all the pictures, was out and about creating signs, doing the program, putting it up, sending it out. Now, this is all on volunteer hours, okay? That was Grifton. She would then come up here to Rensselaerville, upstate New York, and she was the research chair of the Rensselaerville Historical Society. Wow. She was doing grant writing and programs and editing the newsletter or writing and editing the newsletter. So all of these things was all about her sense and love of community. So it wasn't, she did it in both places, Rensselaerville and North Carolina. And her values and wanting to share with everybody has, trickled down to all of us, to her children, her grandkids, but her ability to make people feel. I'm going to read a quote that after my mom passed, we had an informal gathering up here in the lawn on Rensselaerville. And the things that people were saying this is a quote. Many people said the same thing, but this was a quote. She was such a gift. She had the ability to make everyone she interacted with feel as if they were the most special person in the world. There were so many, yes, because that's who she was. She just, I wish I could have you all meet her and hear her. She was very down to earth, very matter of fact, and very supportive of the community she was in, and would do anything for anybody. Everybody she met was a friend. It was not, she would ask very intelligent questions. She would listen. She's one of the few people that would ask questions and intently listen and remember. I've always been jealous of her memory. She could tell me, this was Denise Medved and she is married to Roger, and she would all these, she just would come up with all of these stories. We did a surprise party for her 80th, except it really wasn't a surprise. We surprised her with it, but she had to help us with all the people. And it was amazing to me how many people she knew and how many people were coming. After my father had passed, she really got into Contra dancing. Now, Contra dancing is I say it's a combination of square dancing and line dancing. It's always done to live music, to a band, except in square dancing, where you have 8 people in a group. Contra dancing, you just have 4. And you go through the dance routine with these 4 people, then you move up and down the line and you dance with 2 more people. And she knew everybody, and it was great. Anyway, she would invite all of anybody she met. The doors were always open, whether it was in Grifton, North Carolina, or Rensselaerville, New York. Everybody is always welcome to come in. And we today still feel that same way. Mom was always, she paid such close attention to detail, and she noticed and saw everything and never forgot it.
That's beautiful.
Anyway,
What a gift.
she,
And, something I want to interject with that's important to everyone viewing or listening is that here in Karen's story, the ability to enjoy the richness of being with your family and to enjoy the richness and the gifts and the joys and the treasures of being able to recall all of these moments and personality traits of your mom. It's an important thing to have that about someone in your family. Maybe you don't have a mom, maybe you don't have a dad, whatever. Maybe you don't have siblings. I'm an only child, but the idea of having that history with someone is so precious and so valuable, and can really be a true anchor and a source of a base of values, family values. We hear that word, but what does it mean? A source of family values to all of us. And it also points out what an honor it is to be a care provider for a member of your family. You cared for your mom. I cared for my mom, who passed of Alzheimer's. Many of our listeners know that, and it was a 10-year journey that we took together. And it's some of the most precious years of my life. Yes, sad and painful, but precious, and something that I call on all the time as a support system, those beautiful memories. So I really appreciate you sharing all these great things about your mom, and share a little bit about the house in Rensselaerville and about Rensselaerville. Like, how, obviously you've been going there since before you were born, so you've
yes.
known the house and the community, the hamlet, for a long time.
Right. I'm going to, before I talk a little bit about the house, I do want to kind of pick up on what you just said about the family. My mom was she loved history and community, but family was always number one. And as I said, she never met a stranger, and everybody was always family, and everybody was welcome. And a lot of those values and beliefs are still running through all of us. I know I said that earlier, but my mom started coming to Rensselaerville when she was 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
This house, and we'll show you a little bit, we'll take it around and kind of give an idea. We are in the living room of the home that my great grandmother Nana purchased in 1939.
Wow.
Our fifth generation is now coming up and enjoying the area, the house, the grounds. It used to be, we don't have the you can't really see, but the front part of the house, you see the door there. Wait a sec. That part was the oldest part of the house. It was built sometime in the 1820s. We don't know. We still have never figured out why or where. We don't have the details about how this particular house was constructed. But in 1840, a local architect, his name is Ephraim Russ, built from that doorway all the way up to the front and the upstairs. So he added on to it. The house is in the historic register, or the Register of Historic Places, as are a number of houses here in Rensselaerville. I think Ephraim Russ built like 8 or 9 of them, and they were all slightly different construction. But anyway, my great grandmother bought this in 1839. So my grandmother came and stayed with my grandmother great grandmother when her health started declining. And then my grandmother, I had an uncle who was here taking care of her when her health was going. And then my uncle and mom were the caregivers. And then the house passed from them. And then, of course, I was here helping my mom as her health was declining, and in this sacred space, as far as I'm concerned.
It is sacred space, absolutely.
It is. It's got so much history in it. And part of the history, the reason my great grandmother came to Rensselaerville, she had been in Missouri. And the reason she came here is because her father was Charles Mulford Niles. Okay. Charles Mulford Niles was the son of John Niles and Polly Cook, who lived over in Rensselaerville in the manse. So her father grew up here. Okay. And as she was growing up, she had only heard about Rensselaerville. She came to Rensselaer, but her dad talked about it all the time. She came, I'm going to unplug my computer. Hopefully the battery will kick in. If it doesn't, I'll plug it right back in. We're still there?
Yes.
Okay, because I want to go show you a picture of Aunt Nelly.
Oh, fun.
Go get over here.
Now, is Nelly the one who actually bought the house? No.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Aunt Nelly, this is Aunt Nelly. She was Charles Mulford Niles' sister. Okay, so she was my Nana, my great-grandmother's aunt. Nana was named after Aunt Nelly. Okay, and Aunt Nelly was thrilled because she didn't have children of her own. She raised children because one of her husbands had children. She had not. But Nana, once when she was 16, she came up to visit Aunt Nelly. She fell in love with Rensselaerville. She had lifelong communication, letter writing to Aunt Nelly, back and forth. So after Nana raised her family, everybody was out. She thought, why am I still in Missouri? I want to be in Rensselaerville. So she packed up and bought this house, and we now have 5 generations that
That was
have.
1939.
That was 1939 when she purchased.
But the house was built in the 1800s. That
Yes,
she just bought it.
yes,
And I just love it. I love that she had that pioneering spirit, quite frankly, because, there were not a lot of women who would have moved halfway across the country in 1939 and bought a house in a community that she'd only visited maybe once,
right.
and that she'd heard about through her childhood stories. So I'd like to just point out right now, you said this at the beginning, but the power of stories and storytelling is is huge, and especially what it does in a child's life and in their mind and their brain. My grandmother and my mom also told me stories all the time, and I still see those so vividly in my mind about my grandmother going in 1895 behind her dad on a horse across the river and was afraid she was going to wash away because the river was up over her boots. Things like that. Those stories are powerful, and obviously with your grandmother, Nelly, that she was so influenced by the power of family stories that she moved someplace that she really didn't know about firsthand. She heard it through storytelling from her dad. What an amazing and wonderful thing. And then how big is Rensselaerville itself? Is it a small village?
Rensselaerville is teeny, teeny, tiny. It has, we probably have, okay. Rensselaerville is composed of 5 different hamlets, okay? When I talk about Rensselaerville, I'm talking about the Rensselaerville hamlet, just the small part. There are the town board is for 5 different areas,
Got it.
okay? But the hamlet itself, I always tell people when I'm coming here, I feel like I'm going back in time. I come down a hill, I go around a big curve. It's a small 2-way street. You have these old row houses that are on Main Street that have been there since I can remember. There is a waterfall and a lake, and it's just beautiful. It's just so full of history that there's a grist mill. It used to be big felt mills were here, running off of the water power. And I wasn't really going to talk a whole lot about the history of Rensselaerville, but it's just a phenomenal place. One of the things you mentioned, the family stories and the histories, and when we opened up here, we asked about, had you ever found a letter? Well, our family has over 1,000 letters that were written that have not been published, that were written from, remember I mentioned Charles Mulford Niles, who was my great-great-grandfather, okay? Nana, my Aunt Nelly, the portrait you just saw. There was a number of other cousins. Charles Mulford. There's Charles Mulford Niles and Charles Mulford. They were 2 separate people, but they wrote a lot of letters. This was back in the 1800s. They were going back and forth, and all of these letters were tell the stories of what happened in the daily lives of individuals, because they were writing letters back home. There was no internet. There was no TV. There was the only way to learn about what was happening in the world was by the letters that you received from other people. And a lot of the history books don't talk about these kinds of things. They talk about the facts that happened during the Civil War and what happened during the gold rush, but you don't always get the down home personal feelings that you get from these letters.
Absolutely.
And
One of the
because,
things I always think of is nowadays they don't teach children cursive writing. I mean, obviously you could print a letter, but there's something beautiful about having a letter. I have a love letter. I don't have 1,000 letters, but I have a love letter that was written from my dad to my mom in his handwriting, and it's precious to me to see that that's my dad's handwriting long before I was born. And I used to say when I was little, Daddy, where was I when you wrote this letter? He said, you were a glimmer in my eye. But you're right, the letter writing is almost sadly a lost art. I mean, I guess theoretically we could save emails that we've sent to somebody, and hopefully our great grandchildren will read them. I don't know, but we don't even do that anymore with storytelling. You know, we talk on the phone and it's a lost conversation, or we talk on Zoom and it's a lost conversation unless we happen to record it. And I think it's precious, and there's not even a word that's important enough. Precious is the word I think of, to be able to have those stories, not only of anyone, and seeing letters in museums that Abraham Lincoln wrote or somebody famous are powerful, but to have 1,000 letters from your family is an amazing thing. And I'm just hoping and guessing that maybe your family has an intention of making a book out of that or something like that.
well, since you mention it, I mentioned we have all these letters. My grandmother was a librarian. Grandma, there's a photo of her right over there on the wall.
Oh yeah.
Oops. Anyway, there we go. I can take it up and get it a little bit better. That's my grandmother. She had compiled some letters and did this little pamphlet. It's called
Oh,
Coast to Coast by Railroad, The Journey of Niles Searles in May 1869. She's got this foreword in it talking about Niles Searles, all of this information. He rode one of the first transcontinental railroad rides after the stake was put in at Promontory. Anyway, the final stake. Okay, he rode the first one. He wrote letters back to his wife in Rentzlerville, and that's what this is all about, is
that
from
is
his letters.
fabulous.
Now, what happened is that a author in Nevada City, California. So now Niles Searles, who married a great aunt of mine, Mary Niles, who was my great grandfather's sister. Okay, I'm trying to make it as simple as I can. He married Mary Niles. They moved to California. He became a California Supreme Court justice. There's a Niles, California, named after him. There are his brother Addison also became a Supreme Court justice. So there's a lot of history in Nevada County. Well, David Allen Comstock is a author, researcher, and book publisher. And he was doing some research, and he decided that a lot of people didn't know much about Niles Searles. And when he was looking for stuff, he found this. And he contacted my grandmother. And my grandmother was like, oh, you just don't understand what kind of a job this is. Now, for those of you who have never seen letters written back in the 1800s, they were very space conscious. So they'd write letters all the way over, and then they turn it and they write it crosshatch. So these letters are not easy to read and decipher, okay? He contacted my grandmother. She was like, oh, I just can't do it. Then my mother came in and she said, you just don't understand the enormity of what you're asking, because he was looking for these personal experiences. Eventually, my mom and my grandmother made copies of over 400 of these letters, and they sent them to David Comstock, and he wrote a book trilogy. And a lot of the books, like this is the first one, Gold Diggers and Camp Followers. I've just kind of, there's a whole piece in here that describes the information about this coast to coast. Anyway, and a lot of these books are based on the letters from my family.
Oh my goodness, what
and
an amazing thing.
Brides of the Gold Rush, and I'm going to read a couple of excerpts in some of these. But Denise, you were just talking about the lost art of letter writing. Back in, and I want to read it straight. This is from Greenbacks and Copperheads. This was his third book, and it's in the introduction. And it's easier for me to read it from here because it gives, anyway. So, he was working on this trilogy, and, his intention had been to write it for a longer time until he came across what he calls the Rentzlerville Connection. And that Rentzlerville Connection is all of our letters, okay? Finding those thousands of letters has changed my life and expanded our knowledge of the gold rush and its aftermath in California. The Smithsonian Institution called the letters a national treasure and persuaded the United States Postal Service to quote from one on a stamp issued in 1993 to celebrate the opening of the National Postal Museum. Turns out that I was at that pre-opening with my parents and Dave Comstock and his wife at the National Postal Museum. Wow. And I will pull out the stamp in a minute. It says, the stamp included a facsimile of the handwriting of Charles Mulford. Now, this is not Charles Mulford Niles, who was my great-grandfather. Charles Mulford was a cousin. Okay. The handwriting of Charles Mulford as it appeared in the letter. He had quoted the letter in the Gold Diggers in the first book, and where his concluding words were. Now, this is in a letter from Charles Mulford to Mary Niles, my great-grandfather's sister. Okay, this is what it says. But I beg of you all, do not fail to write often to us, as we trust each steamer to bring from each of you packages more precious than gold dust. Ah. The final version of the stamp combined Charlie's actual salutation with an abbreviated and slightly altered version of his remarks. You don't have a lot of space to put a lot of words on a stamp.
Right.
Okay. But the stamp actually says, my dear cousin Mary, write often, as your packages are more precious than gold dust.
That's amazing.
So we do have, hang on a sec.
You have the stamp.
We do. That's. I wanted to just go get it off of the wall.
Who have any letters or anything precious from your family, be inspired by.
But this is the letter. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Yeah, I can see the quote.
Yep.
That is amazing.
So that, and when the Postal Museum opened, there was a whole section about heading west. If you ever go to the Postal Museum, I have not been there in years, but you would find letters from Mary to Cornelia or to different, and there was, all about their life in California and writing letters back here to
Where is the
Rensselaerville.
post office museum?
It's in Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Okay.
Um,
For those of
it's
you who would like to go, now I'm intrigued to go to the post office museum. What
oh,
a
it's
fascinating trip.
amazing, and the post office museum. I mean, it does change its
Right.
um, displays at different times, but I literally was just floored when we went there. And at that time, this whole section was about the westward expansion. And there were so many different things of the letters that my ancestors had written. And it's just,
Being an only child of someone who had one sister, who had one daughter, who had one son, we used to always laugh and say that our family could have a big family reunion in a closet somewhere because there were so few of us. So this is just like fascinating and exciting to me that you could have all of this history so far back. I mean, I do know some about both sides of my grandparents and great grandparents. I do know that much, but it's just a wonderful thing. I just would like to encourage all listeners to look and see if you have any family heirlooms if you don't know that you do. I mean, is there a brooch that was your great grandmother's? Is there a spoon or bowl, a letter, anything like that? Because what a connection. And remember, that's what we said at the very beginning. This is about honoring the past, nurturing the present by documenting and maintaining family connections that create value and meaning in our lives today. It's a powerful thing to know who your ancestors are or where you come from. There's definitely a drive in all of us to want to know those kinds of things about our family, right? Uh,
yeah.
you had mentioned to me that you have a family tree a little bit that you'd like to share, and that you have a poem that you'd like to share, and I'd like to hear
I
more about this.
I have that before it. I mean, I didn't see when we started, but there's a couple of things I mentioned. I've already mentioned Charles Mulford Niles. He served in the Union Army during the Civil War.
Wow.
We have his uniform.
Oh
This
my
was his
goodness.
hat. So this was my great-great-grandfather. That's the hat. This is his jacket. This is his jacket that he probably wore. And I tell you, it's amazing how small these people were. We have a picture of the four of us children that my brother had this on. He might have been 9 years old.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I do have the pants. I will not take it out right now, but this is his sword. He served. One of the things that I want to share again from the book
Look at that.
is he stood guard at Lincoln's casket after Lincoln had been assassinated. And one of the pieces, I just wanted to kind of show that because I think it's an important part of our history and our family. And people didn't realize how much history actually took place from the people here in Rensselaerville. And this is just one story. It's not all of them. But I want to go, there's so many neat things, but Charles wrote back to his family about when he was standing guard, okay? I would love to read a whole bunch of it, but I'm just going to switch to what he wrote in his letter. We escorted the remains of the president yesterday. It was a mournful occasion. The crowd was immense, but everyone seemed sad. It was a mournful sight to stand by the coffin and watch the expressions of sorrow upon the countenances of the thousands who passed to take their last look at the remains of the murdered president. It was the most solemn spectacle I ever witnessed. Much as I have always loathed and hated treason and traitors in years gone by, the hatred was added to tenfold on yesterday while looking for the last time on President Lincoln's remains. I have no sympathy or mercy for them now. I could not go to New York as I expected last week on account of the excitement. All of the military were under arms to prevent an outbreak. The feelings of the people were wrought up to such a pitch that it was feared that sympathizers might be made to suffer. But everything was quiet. Of course, I cannot leave now, so I shall postpone going until I try and get home in June.
Wow.
It goes on, and it gives some replies of Mary and how she's describing the church services here in Rensselaerville after President Lincoln was shot. It's just, I mean, these are just amazing stories and things that happen. It
I'm
just still
actually
sends
almost in a
chills.
state of awe. Like you say, cold chills to imagine knowing all these things about people that were members of your family. What a beautiful connection. And of course, this show is called Living a Graceful Life. And I really am clearly aware how important inviting grace in your life through your relatives, associations with your family, your sisters, your siblings, your moms, your dad, and maybe sharing stories with those who are still around, to be able to capture some of the history, whether it's just one generation or whether it's many generations like your family. Talk about a gift of grace to
And
know and understand where you came from, and who people who helped form your DNA were, what they were doing and what they were part of and what they felt and believed.
And I know and I understand that I am from a very unique and special family. My family is very close knit and tight, and we all believe in support when any time any of us needs some assistance. There's somebody there to help for whatever reason. And I understand that not everybody has that kind of support system, but by reaching out and supporting your community and helping out, it's amazing the connections that are formed. You know, if you can find what really drives you or things that you are interested in. You know, I know that I kind of feel that I'm really following in my mother's footsteps. You know, when I was staying with her for 3 years here, I would take her to all the things she was interested in. And I'm finding this is fun. This is great. I'm now being part of, you know, I used to help her edit when her ability to type and talk and do things for editing the Historical Society newsletter. I kind of stepped in and I helped her. Well, guess what? I'm still editing that newsletter. I'm still working with the Rensselaerville Historical Society. I've become very good friends with the research chair that my mom used to be the research chair for multiple years. And, you know, my knowledge of Rensselaerville and of my own family is nowhere near as extensive as my mom's. And as she was, you know, starting to have health issues, I realized that some of these stories were going to be lost. So I did audio tape a number of her stories. So it's great for me to be able to go back and listen. And it helps me to remember who was Charles Mulford Niles and who was Samuel Mulford, and, you know, getting all of these in here. And you mentioned our family tree.
Yes.
So if you don't mind,
Yes,
I
you
am
said you'd
going
like to share a family tree.
yeah, can you allow me to share screen?
Absolutely.
It says I was just going to show you because I have a picture. It's easier to show it on the picture.
Yes.
And let's see if I can. So I am just going to, I know it's sideways, But this
Look at that.
is the family tree. When my sisters were in grade school, they were asked to draw a family tree. So they had started this. And my mother took it, and it's color coordinated so you can see who is in the same generation. Now, here is Charles Mulford Niles, John Niles and Polly Cook. They were the ones that lived here in Rensselaerville. Charles Mulford Niles was my great-great-grandfather. So you will see here, this is my mom, and then here's myself and my siblings.
Wow.
We're at the very end of the tree, and it comes down. And this was a way that my mom created it so that all of our relatives, because we are pretty much related to just about everybody here in Rensselaerville.
I'm not surprised. The Wrestlerville Connection.
It's called the Wrestlerville Connection. She's got all these fun little notes that tells us who all of these people were. And it's amazing what you don't probably need to say. I just wanted to give that. And I still have to go back and refer to it. Go, okay, now how did we do this? Where were we all connected?
How nice that you have that to refer to. Just beautiful. And you also said you have a poem that you want to share.
I do have a poem. I mentioned that my mom was very interested in family history. This poem, and again, I'm editing the Historical Society newsletter. So this was a poem that was submitted by one of the Historical Society trustees that she had found on Facebook. And I just thought it was it describes my mom to a T, and the history and family. So here is called Grandma and the Family Tree. There's been a change in Grandma. We've noticed her of late. She's reading history or jotting down some date. She's tracking back the family. We'll all have pedigrees. Oh, Grandma's got a hobby. She's climbing family trees. Poor Grandpa does the cooking now, and so he states, that worst of all, he has to wash the cups and dinner plates. Grandma can't be bothered. She's busy as a bee, compiling genealogy for the family tree. She has no time to babysit. The curtains are a fright. No buttons left on Granddad's shirt. The flower bed's a sight. She's given up her club work. The serial's on TV. The only thing she does nowadays is climb the family tree. She goes down to the courthouse and studies ancient lore. We know more about the forebears than we ever knew before. The books are old and dusty. They make poor Grandma sneeze, a minor irritation when you're climbing family trees. The mail is all for Grandma. It comes from near and far. Last week, she got the proof she needs to join the DAR. A worthwhile avocation, so that we all agree, a monumental project to climb the family tree. Now, some folks come from Scotland and some from Galway Bay. Some were French as pastry, some German all the way. Some went on west to stake their claim. Some stayed nearby the sea. Grandma hopes to find them all as she climbs the family tree. Remember our family tree there? She wanders through the graveyard in search of date or name, the rich, the poor, the in-between, all sleeping there the same. She pauses now and then to rest, fanned by a gentle breeze that blows above the fathers of all our family trees. There were pioneers and patriots mixed in our kith and kin who blazed the paths of wilderness and fought through thick and thin, but none more staunch than Grandma, whose eyes light up with glee each time she finds a missing branch for the family tree. Their skills were wide and varied, from carpenter to cook, and one, alas, the record shows, was hopelessly a crook. Blacksmith, weaver, farmer, judge, some tutored for a fee, long lost in time, now all recorded on the family tree. To some, it's just a hobby. To Grandma, it's much more. She knows the joys and heartaches of those who went before. They loved, they lost, they laughed, they wept, and now for you and me, they live again in spirit around the family tree. It's almost done. At least she's nearly finished and we are each exposed. What life will be the same again, this we supposed. Grandma will cook and sew, serve cookies with our tea. We'll all be fat just as before that wretched family tree. Sad to relate, the preacher came, a preacher called and visited for a spell. We talked about the gospel and other things as well. The heathen folk, the poor, and then 'twas fate it had to be. Somehow the conversation turned to grandma and the family tree. We tried to change the subject. We talked of everything, but then in grandma's voice we heard that old familiar ring. She told him all about the past and soon was plain to see the preacher too was nearly snared by grandma and the family tree. He never knew his grandpa. His mother's name was Clark. He and grandma talked and talked. Outside, it grew quite dark. We've hoped our fears were groundless, but just like some disease, grandma's become an addict. She's hooked on family trees. Our souls were filled with sorrow. Our hearts sank with dismay. Our ears could scarce believe the words we heard our grandma say. It sure is a lucky thing that you have come to me. I know exactly how it's done. I'll climb your family tree.
What a great poem. That's wonderful.
So
Karen, thank you
that,
so much for sharing with us today.
oh,
It's just been a joy to climb your family tree and learn a little bit about Rensselaerville and your beautiful home. And I'm going to do a quick little Ageless Grace tool for people. And as soon as you were talking about that, it's since Karen is an Ageless Grace educator and trainer, and I am too, we need to move from sitting for a while, and I'd like to do a little bit of juicy joints. And I'm not even going to put any music on. We normally do it with music in a chair, but we're going to climb the family tree. So I just like you all to start to move and reach up and grab the branches and use your knees and your legs and reach up and try to pull yourself up that family tree. And maybe you even want to sort of take yourself out on a branch and swing from the branch a little bit and just play swinging from that branch. Or maybe you want to climb back over here and climb further up the family tree and then go out on this branch a little bit and swing from that branch.
and there's a new branch. It just came
Yeah.
up. Has a new name on it.
All right, a new branch, a new baby branch that's coming up the tree. Climb up again, and when we use our fingers, our hands, our wrists, our elbows, our knees, we are also using all of our joints for greater mobility, and that's one of the tools we do in Ageless Grace. So, if you want to know more tools of Ageless Grace, if you'd like to, you can visit our agelessgrace.com website, and you'll find a lot of things on there, including a free class you can download and understand several of the tools and what it's like to take a class. We also have DVDs and flashcards and a playbook, both in hard copy form and downloadables, and those things are also on the winwinwomen.com store if you visit that website. Now, what also is on there is Karen is a trainer, as I said, so she offers several different things. One is a seminar that's 4 hours long for anyone who would like to learn the 21 tools of Ageless Grace, to begin to understand how your brain works, how you can do simple, playful, fun things at home that will make you feel better and that will make your brain sharper and more functional. And then she also has certifications that are 14 hours long for those of you who'd like to learn to teach this program. And she's going to be having one coming up June 10th through the 12th with another trainer, Margie McLaren, who's going to be on our show in a couple more weeks. And so I invite you to go explore. Look under trainings, look under certifications and schedule, and you'll see the seminars and the certifications that are being offered by Karen. And just stay tuned. Keep visiting the website, because Karen is going to be offering with her friend Margie a retreat certification for Ageless Grace in the house in Rensselaerville, and you would get to see that house as well as get certified to be an Ageless Grace educator, and also visit the hamlet of Rensselaerville. So I'm going to close with this thought, that remember, It's never too late to begin to make choices to create the life that you want to live. And that includes the grace, the gift of grace of understanding and knowing more about your family. It includes the gift of grace that you can give to others by interacting with them and sharing with them and telling stories of your family to other people in your family, maybe the new generations coming up. And I would love to end with a what if. What if each one of us were to write a real letter to someone in our family, a real letter written with a pen and a paper and mailed through the mail with a stamp this week? I think we would change the world. Thank you so much for being here, Karen, and thank you to all of our listeners and viewers.
Thank you, Denise. And Rensselaerville is always open.
Thank you.